What's going on, y'all? Smitty here again. I told you guys I was going to do this at least once a week, probably on the weekend. So I'm here again. Talk Steelers ball, talk some free agency, talk some draft, whatever you guys want to talk about. Hit me in the comments and let me know. Joe Frick first. Absolutely. Nobody else can have that claim. Now you are the first one to this stream. Congratulations on that. I'll send you something. Not really. But yeah, I'm coming on here without a set list of things to talk about. You guys are going to dictate the way that this show goes. Whatever you guys want to talk about, we will talk about. I don't know if it could have gotten, I don't know how many guys also watching this watch Afternoon Drive. I don't think we could have had a worse mock draft than the one that we just did on there. And I'm not saying that we did a bad job of drafting. I think the board was just absolutely awful, like a worst case scenario. It was a good way to lay out what the worst possible, in my opinion, scenario would be for the Steelers come draft day. There was still a decent tackle run. There was a wide receiver run, but like kind of in the middle where like JC Latham was probably the best available player to us. And I don't know about how you guys feel. I'm not really a JC Latham guy. So that was, in my opinion, probably the worst possible scenario. I honestly probably would have taken one of the offers that we had to trade back. Allen wasn't necessarily for it. Is what it is. But yeah, if you guys didn't check that out, be sure to go check that out. It was the last episode of Afternoon Drive, or I'll post a picture of what the results were as well to give you guys an idea of the haul that we got and what I think was, again, probably the worst possible scenario for the Steelers to walk out of there with. Since the last time we did one of these, there was some free agent activity, although it's gotten pretty quiet since this for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this past week, signing Cordero Patterson to a 2-year contract, $6 million. Probably, I haven't seen the structure of that contract, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was pretty much all in year one, the guaranteed money, making him very cuttable before year two. That board gave me nightmares. Mims, I hope, isn't taken before 20. That's what I'm saying, dude. Like it was probably a good. I think it was still a good exercise because it gives you an idea again of like what I feel like is probably a pretty damn near close to worst possible scenario for the Steelers. And like, you got to be prepared for that scenario to happen. If that board falls the way that it did, I would like the Steelers to trade back. If they can, of course. It takes two to tango. It's easy to say, I want the Steelers to trade back. Doesn't mean somebody's trying to come up either. But yeah, Cordero Patterson signed to a 2-year contract the same day that it goes into effect, the new kickoff rule, which I'm interested to see how it plays out in the league. I would have liked to have seen them implement this maybe last year during the preseason and say, okay, we're not going to do this during the regular season, but we want to see what it looks like during the preseason, as opposed to just putting it in immediately this year. If you watch the XFL, you know the way that it's going to look, but you're going to have some more creativity on this. Like there's no rules about you having multiple guys back there. Like I think at times you're going to see, Alan and I were talking about, like, for example, with the Dolphins, there's nothing from stopping them from, and I think they're going to at times have like Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane. They're like actual skill guys. They're legit playmakers on offense back there, because I think that that's how important these kickoffs are going to be. I'm glad that it's an impactful play and it's back in the game. But yeah, I'm curious to see, what Danny Smith's going to be cooking up. Are we going to see times where it's Cordero and Calvin? Are we going to see Jalen Warren back there at times? I'm excited to see it. Do you think that we are going to be drafting a quarterback after getting Kyle Allen? I don't think so. I think the fourth quarterback, because we know they're going to add a fourth quarterback, I just don't think they're going to use a draft pick on it. I would say UDFA is definitely possible, but I wouldn't rule out something just like bringing Trace McSorley back as that, camp practice squad arm. There's a kind of the two paths that I see. So, but I don't think they're going to use a draft pick on another one at this point. No. Have you seen Consadamo Jr. has experience at center? There is no way he is playing center. I did not. I missed that. And when is that experience from? I mean, like, what is he talking about? Like Pee Wee high school? Like what? Because I don't actually. Let me look this up now, because I'm very curious if he ever did it at Texas A&M. Center is not listed here at all for snaps that I can see. So I don't know when that was, but I'm good. Them bringing in Penix for a visit is a little puzzling unless it's just a smoke screen. My theory on this and this is just me. I don't know this to be the case. Is they probably had this set up prior to kind of the way that everything shook out with the quarterbacks. Um, and I just feel like the Steelers aren't the type of franchise to cancel a meeting like that. They probably just don't want to do that to Penix. But at the same time, I think, you got 30 of these things. You can still get good info from him, find out about his receivers. Um, find, even if they're not to use a draft pick on Penix right now, down the line, like we didn't think that Justin Fields would ever become a Steeler, right? I mean, like who's to say in a second contract or something like that, they don't circle back on a Michael Penix or something. So I don't think it's like completely useless here, but I don't think that this was something that was scheduled after the fact with the way that the quarterback room shook out. I think this was done prior. I have no clue. I saw him quoted saying that I don't believe him or Herbig should. Herbig is a backup. I 100% agree. And I don't think he's a backup at center. Like, I think he is a backup guard, especially in Arthur Smith's offense. I think like there's too much functional mobility that is required from the position that I just don't see with Herbig. You got to be able to climb to the second level. You got to be able to pull. I just don't think he has that type of athleticism to play center in Arthur Smith's offense. So if that is their plan, I'm very confused. I would rather them, get James Daniels snapping the ball and get him prepared to play center than go into the season with Nate Herbig. So I can't imagine that's their like it's so hard because I've been in lockstep with the Steelers on a lot of this. Like, even if I don't agree, I can see the vision for what they're trying to do with center. I have no clue what's going on. The second highest paid player we're acquired is making $6 million. Do you think we can transform into a true competitor without taking any risks? That's an interesting question. It's in an offensive league. They're really still, in my opinion, relying on that defense, and everything that they've kind of done offensively has kind of been about being risk adverse. I think it takes some stones to turn over the quarterback room that they did in the way that they did. But like the type of football that they're hoping to play is still pretty just risk adverse, handling the football, not turning it over. I don't know, Adam. That's a really good question. I mean, what do you think? That's what I want to know. Like, what is your take on this? Because like this team, in my opinion, is going to be able to compete for a playoff spot for sure. Like, I still think they're going to be in the mix. But if you're talking about like when I read true competitor, I'm thinking Super Bowl contender. And in an AFC with Patrick Mahomes, with Josh Allen, with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud, Aaron Rodgers coming back, like it's tough for me to have that type of vision for the 2024 Steelers personally. But I want your guys' takes on that as well. Saw your draft with Allen. I like SVP, but he is a zone blocking center. I would like Frazier. I would also like Frazier. Man, like I said, I think that played out as poorly as it could have. But I still I think that was a good exercise to do and put out there for that reason, like to show you guys the way that it could go on draft day. We kind of got burnt. What were the Chiefs doing? Taking Zach Frazier in the second round. Like, what is the plan with him? Like, you're not playing him at guard either. Trey Smith and Joe Tooney. So, what were they not paying Creed Humphrey in this scenario or something? Like, I don't know. It was a weird sim. But it was unfortunate that we lost out on him. The move up, what it was costing, not even close. Like, the gross overpay on our part for what the teams weren't taking anything close to the trade value chart that it says is fair value. So, yeah, it was unfortunate the way that the whole thing played out, but is what it is. Back to Cordero Patterson, in terms of the offensive utilization, like 2 seasons ago, over 1,100 total scrimmage yards, like heavily involved in the Atlanta offense. It even, okay, so slight dip in 2022, 817 yards from scrimmage, still touched the ball quite a bit, but last year, just 50 rushing attempts for 181 yards, and then he only caught 9 passes for 38 yards. So I don't know how much utilization we're actually going to see of him in the offense. Obviously going to be heavily involved in this with this new kickoff role. And I think it's still a great addition because of that. But like, I don't think there's any room for concern in terms of him kind of messing with what Najee and Jalen have had going on, or thinking that he kind of like checks a box for them in the receiver room, which we can have that conversation too, because like, adding Quez Watkins, adding Van Jefferson, that does nothing for me in terms of like Van Jefferson to me Could be an Allen Robinson replacement. He's a pretty good blocker. Arthur Smith obviously covets him. He brought him over to Atlanta last year before he hit unrestricted free agency this offseason and wanted to bring him back to where he was. Quez Watkins, though, like, I mean, I watched him. My boy Derek Bell just put up a video on him. I don't see it. Like, I don't know that he's going to make this roster. I think he's going to have an excellent camp, and I almost wonder if you're talking about him and Calvin Austin for one spot. I don't see the need for both of those guys, and I prefer Calvin Austin. So I don't want to say be shocked if Quez Watkins makes this roster, but he certainly shouldn't prevent them from doing other things. Like, they should still be in the market for a vet receiver, in my opinion, and they should still be drafting one early. So, yeah, all the different mock applications have players fall. I didn't know the best use. Taking Frazier was hilarious by the Chiefs. No rationale there. Yeah, I mean, you really upsetting that they did that. Like, we didn't think that was at all a possibility, right? Like, we were looking at the teams, Allen, like, actually having the rosters pulled up at the time, going through this, like, the thought process, all there for us, makes sense. We're going through it. And then the Chiefs take Zach Frazier, and we're like, what? Like, that was not at all a team that we thought was going to be a hurdle here for us with Zach Frazier falling. So, but again, it is what it is. You got to deal with what the simulator gives you. A ton of people have been very upset in the comments, but what can you do? Breakfast with Zach. Yeah, favorite time of the week. Last couple weeks, huh? I'm curious about like the time for this too. Like, I appreciate you guys jumping on this early in the morning. I don't know if this is the best time to be doing these, but it's the best time for me. So that's why I'm on here right now. But I appreciate anybody that's in here. If you aren't already, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We've been talking a lot about the draft. We're going to be here live for the NFL draft. Tyler's actually going to be in Europe, so he will not be here. But I will be here with a lot of my friends. You guys see Drew and Joe in the comments. They're definitely going to be here. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a lot of giveaways as well. So excited for that. 3 Steelers jerseys, a pair of Steelers tickets, a Terry Bradshaw Funko Pop, some of our merch around the 412 merch. And then if you guys see, I'm normally doing giveaways with Game Changers. Maybe my favorite t-shirt. I literally have 25 Game Changer shirts, just to let you guys know. It's not something I just promote. I legitimately wear the product all the time. We're going to be giving away a couple of their shirts as well. So definitely want to be here for that. Night 1 and night 2 of the draft. Watkins and Van Jefferson I view as wide receiver 4 and puts Austin's spot in doubt. Yeah, they got Pickens, right? Who's like a fringe 1-2, like definitely a very good NFL player. And then they got a bunch of like wide receiver 4 depth pieces, maybe make the roster, bubble guys. Like, I just, in Arthur Smith's offense, like, you don't need to have, a Deontay Johnson and George Pickens duo like that, I guess. Like only 34 targets in total to the slot receivers last year in Atlanta. I get it. It's not like a high volume passing offense, but like they can do better than what they have right now on that depth chart. And they're going to, again, I think they're going to spend a relatively high pick in the draft. Then you're relying on a rookie. And there's only like certain types, in my opinion, that fit that. I've talked a lot about like Ricky Pearsall. I think Xavier Legette could make some sense for them. I know they really like Malachi Corley, Roman Wilson. I think those are probably the types that you're talking about here, especially with kind of connecting the dots on the interest. It's pretty easy to see. Okay, probably day 2 is where they're going to take one of these guys, and all those two Washington receivers that are not Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, like those 2 guys, I think would be in play as well. Josh Reynolds' contract just came out on OTC, 2 years, $9 million. Whoa. So the 14 million that was put out there, I was curious what it actually was, right? Like, they always float out these numbers, and then you're like, okay, but what is it actually? Like, what is the real money on this? Man, come on. Like, Josh Reynolds would have been perfect for this offense for sure. Like, for even with again, Van Jefferson, Quez Watkins, like, even if you're going to still make those additions, definitely still could have done Josh Reynolds 2 years with 9 million. So 9 million is what he's guaranteed. I'm guessing you're saying up to 14 million. Yeah. Yeah, he should have been a Steeler. I think he would have been a perfect fit for Arthur Smith's offense. And then I know some people have probably a bad taste in their mouth about that NFC Championship game, but he's a good player, man. Did Ben Albright ask you to be on his show yet, or did he block? Neither. Neither one, actually. But Ben's a guy that I've met down. If you are a Senior Bowl person, if you've ever been to the Senior Bowl and you've been to a place called Veets, the most magical spot in Mobile, Ben Albright is somebody that I've had conversations with at Veets before. So comes off as a pretty good dude. I know that people that engage with him on Twitter might not agree with that, but as somebody that's met him in person, I think he comes off as a pretty good guy. So, all right, we've kind of talked about the draft receivers, right? I want to know your guys' opinion on not only when we think that they will take one, because again, I think that day 2 is probably a sweet spot. Now, whether that's at 51 or one of those thirds, we will see how the board falls, but I think they're going to certainly leave day 2 with a receiver. Who are your favorites within that? Like who screams Steeler to you guys? Who do you guys like specifically for the scheme? Again, like I think some guys you could throw out there, Malachi Corley, Xavier Legette, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen McMillan. They were at UNC. Arthur Smith was at UNC. Probably got a pretty decent look at Tez Walker there. I think Jermaine Burton at Alabama, who could slide a little bit. There's been some talk about like off the field stuff, which, hey, we'll talk about screaming Steeler. Jermaine Burton, I think definitely could make sense as well if there's a little bit of a slide there. Going down a little bit. I love Javon Baker, man. Like, I don't know that they're going to wait that long to take a receiver, but if they double dip, that could be one. Jalen Coker out of Holy Cross, another, later guy that I'm a huge fan of. Brendan Rice, they love the bloodlines. I think he could be in play. I mean, I know a lot of people are gonna like the Roma Dunze, the fact that they like met with him, like people are just like, oh, they're trading up for Roma Dunze. I don't see it happening. That's fun to talk about, I guess. Adonai Mitchell, maybe out of like the guys that are up higher. Brian Thomas Jr. Like if they take one at 20, it's gonna be one of those two guys, I would think. I like Ladd McConkey. I think he's probably in like that weird spot where it's like after 20, but before 51 is where he's going to go. Maybe like a trade down candidate. Like if they do move back from 20, if their socks are blown off from an offer, somebody's got to come up to get, I don't know, maybe Penix is still on the board. Somebody wants to secure that 5th year. They're trading up to the Steelers to get in front of some other teams on the back end of that first round. Like who picks after the Steelers? Dolphins, Eagles, Minnesota's 2nd pick, which they probably won't have at that point. Dallas, I don't know. It sounds like Dak's getting free agency after the year. Green Bay, Tampa, Arizona at 27, Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore, San Fran, Kansas City. I think there's got to be a lot of teams. There's a lot of spots there that a team could trade from round 2 back into round 1. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. This receiver class is interesting to me. I know it's super deep. It was hard to put my top 10 together. Actually, let's talk about that because I've put together at least what I'm not going to say my final top 10. There still might be some tweaks to it. I haven't watched everybody that I want to yet, but I'm ready to put out the take and get some smoke on this. So I'll read you guys my top 10 and let me hear it. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously. I am a Roma Dunze over Malik Neighbors guy. So they're 2 and 3, super close. I get I think they could be any order. Like if you have them flipped, no problem on my end. Adonai Mitchell, number 4 for me, over Brian Thomas Jr., who is number 5. And then we get into a lot of like just your flavor. And this is where I think there's going to be a lot of discrepancy with a lot of people. Super high on Ricky Pearsall, who is my wide receiver 6 in this class. Don't know that I've seen anybody else having that high. I'm cool with it. Jalen Polk, Ladd McConkey, Malachi Corley, Xavier Legette round out my top 10. Some guys that weren't in there that you might be surprised by that you've seen on other lists, right? Troy Franklin has been on a ton of top 10 lists. Keon Coleman, I can't get on board with. Physical specimen for sure. The testing, I'm not on board with him. I don't even fully see it on film, to be honest with you. Johnny Wilson, another Florida State receiver, massive, 6'6". I'd almost rather throw that dart later than take Keon Coleman high. Thoughts on the JPJ potentially sliding comments? Heard he has bad medicals. Yeah, there was so the medical talk was prior to, like, I think it beat the sliding thing by about like a week and a half or so. Like we had heard there might be some medical stuff with Jackson Powers Johnson. But it was like, I think everybody was kind of like brushing it under the rug. And then it came out yesterday. Matt Miller, ESPN, was talking about how, the league just isn't there with him. Like they don't view him the same way that, all the outside noise kind of talks about him like. And he's not going top 25 probably. And like, that was an interesting thing because Alan was telling me, talking to a Rams guy, like 19 seems to be the ceiling for Jackson Powers Johnson, which seems kind of crazy right now. Or I wouldn't say right now. It seems crazy compared to where the conversation was about Jackson Powers Johnson. Because if like 19's starting the conversation, and then who's to say a team doesn't like Zach Frazier more? Or, Graham Barton, really good player out of Duke who is going to be a center at the NFL level. I don't know. I don't know where Jackson Powers Johnson's going to go, man. Like it's crazy to me because the tape is just so clean. But if the medicals aren't, I get it. I'm not viewing those medicals, so I don't know what they look like. I don't know what's popping up on them, but the tape speaks for itself. He's awesome. So I get you got to be a special center to go in round one to go within the top 20-ish range. I think he is. I think he's that good. Dunes, it's weird how these show up on here because look how it looks like to me. I'm assuming that it says that Dunze over greater than Neighbors. I knew you were my guy. Yeah, I mean, again, like it's not like some huge gap or anything for me. I just think he's a better, above the rim, go up and get it player. That's kind of always going to be my type. What Neighbors can do with the ball is special, though. Like again, these are two of my top overall 6 players. Like we're not having some discussion where it's like a Dunze's up here and Neighbors is down here. So I just slightly prefer Roma Dunze. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why it shows up like that. I'm assuming that's what you typed on an X. Also, it's cool that X comments are able to be shown on here again because for a while that wasn't a thing, and I was prepared to have to tell you guys, hey, come over to YouTube, or we are on Twitch still. If you guys want to head on over to Twitch at around the 412. Hmm. I was just looking at something. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this whole process is going to shake out for them. Again, I would like to think they're going to add like a capable center before the draft, so it's not like pigeonholed where they absolutely have to take one early. But like as we continue to go, I know Brian Allen's still out there. Nick Gates is still out there. They could go into the trade market. Omar didn't rule that out, but like, how many teams are trading starting capable centers? I mean, you might have Allen threw out like Liam Eichenberg in Miami because they brought in Aaron Brewer. That'd be a fine stopgap. Is Robert Hainsey available in Tampa? That could be another one that's interesting. Luke Fortner, who lost his job to Mitch Morse, signed by the Jaguars after visiting with the Steelers. Like maybe guys like that. I don't know. There might be a couple out there that are on the trade market, but like people don't trade starting capable offensive linemen. Like that's when do you think the first defensive player goes? I don't see any of them going in the top 10 to 12. I mean, the conversation probably starts at 8 with Atlanta, right? Like it wouldn't absolutely shock me to see them go with like a Dallas Turner there, or a corner, there. AJ Terrell's going into the last year of his contract, and even so, you need another guy on the other side. I think the conversation probably starts at 8, but like, where actually do I for sure think that they go defense? Man, if it's not 8, it will be whatever team between the Vikings, Broncos, and Raiders doesn't move up and get a quarterback. The first one. That's my take. So 8's the ceiling for me. The floor is 13. That's what I'll say. I agree, but the talk of Neighbors over Marv has been wild for me. Yeah, I mean, I leave that up for a second. Again, like, to me personally, I don't think that at the top of the board like that is where you have those conversations about like just like a preference or like a certain type of flavor because they're very different. Again, like what Neighbors can do with the ball in his hands, yards after catch, like it's just special. But Marv's overall game, like I can't poke any holes in it. Like again, kind of going back to the Jackson Powers Johnson talk, it's just super clean tape. He can do everything. So I get like Neighbors more explosive, but I'm in agreement. And I struggle talking about this because I don't want it to make it seem like I'm talking down to Neighbors. It's more just like propping Marv up to that level. Like he's that good. clean of a prospect as I've watched. What was I just talking about before that, though? Oh, the defensive player thing is very interesting, just to go back to that for a second. Again, like, looking at the board, Chicago, obviously, at 1 isn't gonna do it. Washington at 2. New England at 3, like, even if they don't take a quarterback and they're trading back, it would be somebody else coming up for a quarterback. 4, 5. Giants, in my opinion, are locked in at receiver. Titans, right now, I would say tackle. I mean, like, Joe Alt makes a ton of sense if he gets there. Although, like, with the way Harbaugh was talking about the trenches, I think 5 is probably where the conversation starts for him. Yeah, I would say for the first defensive player, 8, floor 13. Let me rephrase. What would you do? Keep making low-risk moves to get a little better, tear it down, and trade stars, make a Godfather offer for May or Dak or Herbert or T-Law, etc., something else? Oh, well, I mean, I'm not gonna be like what like I always say this, like, I'm always shooting for the stars, I feel like. Like, I always want them to make the big splash. That's go for it all, you know? I don't know that, like, this year specifically, though, with what they've already done, I don't think that those moves make sense. But, like, if it doesn't work out this year at quarterback, then yeah, I mean, get very aggressive, in my opinion. Yeah, the low risk moves aren't getting them again, like you put it here, get a little bit better. They're still going to be in the playoff mix. They still might be able to compete to win this division, but they're not competing overall for the AFC with the way that this roster is right now. So, that was an interesting group of quarterbacks put together too. May, Dak, Herbert, and T-Law. Man, if they like, especially those last two, Herbert is like, people have been talking about that just because, like, obviously, does Jim Harbaugh want to get JJ McCarthy? The dead cap that would be taken on by the Chargers if they move Justin Herbert is absolutely insane. I want to say it's close to 200 million right now. I got to look at this because I was looking at it the other day when somebody mentioned, "Oh, are we sure that Harbaugh is not just going to want to get his guy?" Okay, 137,960,876 in dead cap right now. If the Chargers were to I mean, that would have to be like Herbert being like, "I'm not playing for this franchise," which I don't see. My boy Steelers DB, I was just talking about you earlier, with the videos that you've been doing. Really good breakdowns on Cordero Patterson, Van Jefferson. I don't think you ended up doing that one on Quez Watkins at least yet, and I know you were talking about him on X, and I see why you didn't want to make a full video about him. But yeah, I don't know. This wide receiver room is interesting. The center stuff's interesting, but like, tackle, right? Like, how many tackles from this class? Like, I mentioned the mock draft we did where we land JC Latham, and that, again, I felt like was probably like the worst possible scenario overall for the Steelers. But the way to sell it to Steelers fans is that probably gets Dan Moore Jr. off the field right away. So is that enough for you guys to be on board with that pick? What is priority number 1 for you guys between now and the end of the draft? I mean, they don't have a center option on the roster, so I guess that. But, like, how important is it for you guys, for the Steelers to end the draft and have a replacement for Dan Moore Jr. on the roster? Harbaugh is throwing the most insane smokescreen of all time. They get Marv to fall to 5. Let's be real. Mm. Man, I just feel like it would be so Harbaugh-like to go weapon at 5. That's just me. I think it's going to be Joe Alt, to be honest. I think that's what he wants. Interesting is one way to describe the wide receiver room. Yeah, it's Pickens and a bunch of guys, huh? They got like 4 wide receiver 4s on the roster right now. So, yeah, interesting. Probably actually somehow being generous to the wide receiver room with what is in there right now. Derek, I want your opinion on this as well because we were talking about it a little bit earlier. Do you think that what they've done, not should it, because I know in your mind it should be shouldn't. But do you think that this is going to preclude them from adding another receiver until the draft, what they've done? Because, like, Quez Watkins, I don't see how he makes this football team, to be quite honest with you. But, like, in their mind, I don't want you to just give your opinion. I want you to tell me what you think from the team's perspective, how they're looking at it. Kenny Pickett is no longer QB1. That was my priority number one. Successful offseason, in my opinion. They said you're playing in the slot. You guys see that video of Drewski on the construction site where he's running routes? That's me. If I got to line up in the slot. Have the Steelers shown interest in Latham? I think he would be perfect plug and play right tackle. He absolutely would be perfect plug and play right tackle. My issue with Latham is more about the ceiling. I absolutely think he could step in and play right tackle from day one. So again, if priority number one is just about getting Dan Moore Jr. off the field, JC Latham absolutely makes sense. In terms of interest, that brings me to a bigger point here. The Steelers are doing a much better job at keeping cards close to the vest, I feel like, this year. I don't know if maybe – so last year with it being, Kahn and Weidl's first cycle, maybe they learned a little bit from last year and they don't want it to be that open again in terms of their interest. Like, because historically we've been kind of able to connect the dots here on Steelers' interest. This year, like outside of I know for a fact how much they love Amarius Mims, I couldn't tell you where their interest lies. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we are going to draft tackle till late round. Travis Glover is a name to watch out for late. Travis Glover, they brought him in for a 30. By the way, I guess we should stop calling them top 30s. That was put out there because top 30 makes it seem like they're top 30 prospect, which, if you're bringing in a guy like Travis Glover, not a top 30 prospect, but he's an interesting dude. Georgia State offensive tackle is massive. But yeah, he'd probably be like that day 3 developmental guy. And then again, you're talking about Dan Moore Jr. playing pretty much the entire year, I would think, a redshirt year. If Travis Glover is a guy that you have hope for developing long term. So, yeah, I would say if that was the route they were going, Matt Gonsalves out of Pitt would kind of be in that. Javon Foster out of Missouri, Christian Jones, tackle out of Texas, like those guys, if they were waiting on tackle, kind of all within that same bucket to varying degrees, like third rounder later. Still all quiet on Tyler Boyd front. Yeah, they put an offer out on the table like the second day of tampering, and it's been quiet since then. They are, I can tell you they're not budging. Like it's going to have to be Tyler Boyd and his camp that concede on that. So that offer's been on the table. They're not moving off of it. I think that he was hopeful that if he waited it out, the Steelers would get more desperate, and that's not happened. And I don't think it's going to happen. A theory that I've kind of tossed around in my head is what if they double dip a wide receiver, sort of like 2022 with GP and CA3? Vet pool is so diluted right now that I'm not sure if an upgrade exists. Yeah, I mean, double dipping at receiver is certainly interesting, especially because like the later round guys, there's a lot of slots. So are you getting the outside guy early and then the slot late, or like Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan, I guess would be interesting late. And I've already kind of talked about the other guys, Javon Baker, Jalen Coker, but like not super huge guys. So I guess it depends on what type they're looking for. But like the idea of double dipping, I could certainly get on board with the way that room looks right now. I'm just curious as to like, how early do they take that first one? What type of receiver is it? And then who's the guy later? Like how early? When does is 20 in play for you guys for a receiver or no? Like if you're connecting the dots in terms of the guys they're interested in, is 51 kind of where that conversation starts? They didn't go to Oregon's pro day, so no one thinks we are interested in JPJ, but I think he is our round 1 target. I mean, yeah, this is certainly in play to be the year that trend is broken, in my opinion. I don't know. For sure, I don't know how much. Like, I can't guarantee any type of level of interest there with Jackson Powers Johnson. Met with him at the Senior Bowl. Like, they've had conversations with him for sure. They're interested. I just don't know to what level the interest is in. And it's interesting because of how many guys like top end prospects are on the West Coast this year, and the Steelers' historical lack of scouting on that side, like Mark Bruner, who's their West Coast scout, I say he's got the best job in the world because they don't ever show interest heavily out there. But I mean, Pat Myers had conversations with Jackson Powers Johnson. Thomas had conversations with Jackson Powers Johnson. There's nothing to say he still won't be one of the remaining 30 visits that they have. So, like, I don't think that he should be off the table just because the Steelers at his pro day, not being at his pro day. With the sheer amount of right tackles available in the draft, it would be so disappointing not to get a piece that at least provides a path to move Broderick back to the left. I agree, man. Like, looking at this draft class of tackles, the Steelers have to get involved here for sure. Again, obviously you got J.C. Latham early. Like, Fuaga would be awesome, especially for this system. I just don't know if I see it. Trey Fontenot, Amarius Mims would be interesting, right? Like, I would be curious to see what they would do with Mims and Broderick if those are the two tackles in terms of which side each one plays. Tyler Guyton, I don't know that he's on the field right away. But even like developmental guys, Patrick Paul, Roger Rosengarten, I really like. Blake Fisher's another one that I kind of throw into that. Like, I don't know how high the ceiling is, but I think that pretty steady floor. I could say that he's going to be an NFL caliber tackle. Oh, I like this name a lot. If they double dip Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, which, by the way, that name is awesome. The other Georgia receiver. Yeah, man, I think that that's definitely a name too. We've seen him kind of linked to the Steelers. PFN has him way down as their number 350 prospect, 6'1", 195. The RAS probably gonna have him available later on. But yeah, if they double dip, I do think that is probably a guy to watch. And the Steelers have shown interest. So strongly believe Khan is stating that Broderick will play left tackle eventually means they're going to tackle at 20. And when Dan more significantly struggles, Broderick will be at left. Yeah, eventually kind of leaves it open to interpretation, right? Like, eventually I'm going to end this live stream. Who knows when that's going to be? But yeah, I the Steelers are going to get involved in this tackle class. It's just, again, like it is with receiver, like it is with center. We know they're going to take one. How early is it going to be? And slot corner, we haven't really touched on slot corner a lot, but I do believe they get involved in this tackle class. You need a pick to do that above. I'm curious if we see a couple day 3 receivers end up as top 30s. I'm assuming lots of interest in Rosemy Jack Saint, but that's probably a 6th rounder later guy. Yeah, full agreement there. Number 20 not in play for wide receiver unless one of the top 3 falls to 20. The one that's interesting is Brian Thomas, right? Although, again, we're not his pro day. Doesn't seem like super interesting. Although the schedules, right? The schedules have kind of messed things up. Like, some of those early pro days happened during free agency, like the first couple days of the tampering period in free agency, some big pro days. And then you got other ones like this, where they were going on while the owners' meetings were going on down in Orlando. So I don't know. Like, that's kind of my takeaway so far from this is I wouldn't rule out this being the year that trend finally breaks with, Omar and Tomlin not being at the pro day of their first round pick. No, he's coming from a small school with little exposure, but I think he'd be someone to look at round 7. I mean, the NFL bloodlines, right? His dad came in and did really great work for the Steelers when they needed it in 2022. Tons of injuries on the back end. So, yeah, Noah, I think, is definitely somebody to watch. I think the Steelers will like him quite a bit, specifically for the way that Terrell Austin likes to use players on the back end. Smart dude. Played a lot of different positions, can wear a lot of hats for the defense. I like Jack Saint. I haven't watched a ton of him, but the Steelers being interested in him made me kind of turn on the tape on him. I like him, but I'm with Derek. Like, that's a guy probably 6th rounder, so I can't see them throwing that dart any earlier, or any team for that matter. I think that's probably relatively close to where he's going to go. So, do you think they'll move Daniels to center and Herbig is now the starting right guard? Dude, from what I've seen, Daniels hasn't done so he has not snapped a ball here in 2 years. He only has very minimal center experience in Chicago, but it was good. Like, the tape was good when he played it there. So I was all for him definitely getting reps there at center, at least being prepared to do so, but they just haven't had him do it. Like, he didn't snap a ball during training camp either the 2 years. Never had him do it in practice, and from what I've seen this offseason, that hasn't changed. So, as of right now, I really don't believe that's in play. I know I would like for it to be the case. I would rather see Daniels there than Herbig, but there's nothing that has happened that leads me to believe that's in play for them. So, I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't know, and the other thing with the centers is it just really feels like they're pigeonholed here. They're listing Mason McCormick as a center now in here. That's interesting. Okay. Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, Cedric Van Pran Granger, Bram Barton, I think is definitely going to be able to successfully make that transition. Maybe that's not everybody's there with that yet. How many centers in this class are we thinking are going to start right away? Like, Steelers are kind of pigeonholing themselves where it's got to be from this very select group of people that they land one of them. And I hate that. I think you got to have some type of like fallback there. You got to have somebody that can start. 4 QBs I listed seem the most gettable guys that are Super Bowl caliber guys. Who would be on your list of gettable, someone that the team would be willing to trade away, Super Bowl caliber guys? If they're Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks, I don't think they're getting traded away. Like Dak is probably good to put on there because it seems like they're going a different direction after this year. Like, unless something crazy happens, not going a different direction. He's going to hit free agency. They can still bring him back, but like the way that they structured that contract, can't tag him. It seems like he's definitely hitting free agency after the year. So like that one I could see including, but like I get why they were on your list. Like most gettable, I guess, but I don't think it's even like in the realm of possibility. Drake May. I mean, I guess he's not on a team yet. And I guess if he were to somewhat slide, man, I can't even imagine what that price would be. But let me take a quick look around the league here. And we'll just go through this team by team. Josh Allen, obviously not going anywhere, right? Tua, does that move the needle? Aaron Rodgers, I mean, that's Patriots don't have one right now. Lamar, no. I mean, the division guys, obviously, those guys aren't in play. CJ Stroud, obviously not. Trevor Lawrence, we'll see how this year, end of last year was so ugly. He was banged up. Everybody was banged up, it seemed like, in Jacksonville, but they were just in the playoffs. He hadn't won a playoff game the previous year. I'm curious to see what that looks like. Gabe Davis in, Calvin Ridley out. Anthony Richardson, no. Will Levis, obviously, with the way that they're building that roster, it kind of seems like there's a good amount of belief there in Will Levis. Mahomes, no, obviously. Raiders, I guess we could consider Gardner Minshew that guy right now. Denver don't have one. Chargers is Herbert. Dak, Jalen Hurts. Giants, Daniel Jones. Commanders don't have one. About to take somebody. Jared Goff. Jordan Love. Vikings don't have one. Bears don't have one. Baker Mayfield just re-signed. Derek Carr with the Saints. Kirk Cousins just signed in Atlanta. Bryce Young. Brock Purdy. Stafford. Geno Smith. Kyler. Kyler and Geno, the last two that I said, if for some reason, if those two teams were moving them. But again, you're talking about what, like fringe top 10, 12, 15 guys. I don't know. I just think that that's not even like a conversation right now, to be honest. We are almost in the position to have to draft a center in round 1. I don't want to say they have to do anything, but yeah, about as close as you can get to totally pigeonholing yourself into a position. Bullard or Sainristil have to be a Steeler. 2 of my guys, yes. Bullard listed as a safety, but he's probably going to be a slot in the NFL. I think that his skill set translates there, but he can definitely do some safety stuff still. Can play deep half. So I'll be interested to see if how high they are. I mean, I know that they love Mikey Sainristil for sure. And I hate player comps, but like Mike Hilton with better coverage ability is Mike Sainristil. He's awesome. Great athlete. If we get both of them in round 3, that would be a win. Who's that? You're talking Bullard and Sainristil? I mean, that would be talk about double dipping there. Unless they would be viewing Javon Bullard as a safety. But again, like I think that his skill set translates more to playing in the slot at the next level. But we haven't talked a lot about slot corner. All the conversation's been about center, tackle, wide receiver, and I get it. Like obviously, holes there for sure, but they need another corner. Like Dante Jackson, is he moving the needle that much for you guys anyway? And even if he is, okay, so you got Joey Porter Jr., him, you got Darius Rush, Corey Trice as developmental guys. What else? What else do they got right now? Who's the starting nickel on this team right now? Is it Dante Jackson? And are they going to have somebody else, bringing somebody else to play on the boundary? I don't know. I tend to think that they're looking for their nickel in this draft class. What if the Steelers plan on Georgia O-line? Broderick, Van Pran, Mims, Pearsall at 51. I'd get on board with that. I mean, if they walk away from the first round with Amarius Mims, I'm not upset about it. Only 8 starts. Man, if he had more tape, the tape is that good that he might be my tackle 2 in this class over Olu Fashanu, who, in my opinion, took a step back in 23 from where he was in 22. But Mims was just so good, man. I know that it's limited reps. He's got some injury concerns. The tape was so good. He's further along in pass pro for sure than Broderick was, and maybe still is. So Mims would be a home run pick for me. But again, that conversation we've been having about Dan Moore Jr. Does it take Dan Moore Jr. off the field right away? I don't know. What's your thoughts on bringing back Pat P? I mean, I could get on board with it. They're not going to do anything with him until after the draft. They're going to see what they come away from the draft with. It could be a late free agency ad, depending on what boxes they're able to check in the draft. I don't hate it, but I don't think it's their plan A, B, or C, to be honest. Like I think they're keeping him in their back pocket. I would say the same thing about another one of their guys, Shannon Sullivan, who's a free agent still out there, and I think played better than I anticipated, at least. So, yeah, both those guys that could maybe play this. But here's the other part of this, right? How many times, and it popped up on tape, did we see, Patrick Peterson, the tackling issues, right? And like that's prerequisite for playing in the slot or playing safety. So I don't think that you can bring him back with the idea of him playing significant snaps at either of those spots unless you see improvement there. Like, I don't know if it was a technique, but like it's not like a guy early in his career like Joey Porter Jr., where you're talking about cleaning up some tackling technique. He just wasn't very good at it. So didn't mind Sullivan. Yeah, I thought he was, again, better than I anticipated. I'm not saying he's some world beater or anything like that. You didn't notice him a ton. And for a corner of his caliber, I think that's a compliment. You weren't seeing him getting picked on in coverage. I thought he helped out in the run game, made some plays around the line of scrimmage, helped out in run support. So, I thought he did his job last year for the Steelers admirably. But again, that's not somebody that I'm like, hey, pounding the table for them to bring back. But if we get deep, after the draft and free agency goes and we're in the training camp and still looking for an option, he's still available on the market, I don't hate the idea of a reunion. Okay. Anything else? We got over 200 people in here right now. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Again, we've been talking a lot about the draft on here. We are going to be live for the first 2 nights of the NFL draft. Night 1 probably go live 15-ish minutes before the draft starts. We're giving away 3 Steelers jerseys, a pair of Steelers tickets, Terry Bradshaw Funko Pops, some of our Around the Foreman 2 merch, and then a couple shirts from Game Changers as well. Going to be a great night. My co-host Tyler is actually going to be in Europe during the NFL draft, so we'll see if he pops in at all. But I'm gonna have a bunch of friends on the stream with me, so be a lot of fun. Mid Kuiper Jr. definitely going to be making an appearance that night as well, so be sure to be here for that. But I appreciate everybody being in here. Probably gonna wrap this thing up unless you guys have anything else you want to drop in there real quick. Maybe 5 or so minutes if you guys have anything else that we didn't touch on yet or want to go over something we already did. talked about free agency stuff since the last time that I was live last week. Okay, so yeah, those were afterwards. Yeah, Dean Lowry and Kyle Allen being brought in obviously don't move the needle. Maybe for depth purposes. Again, I don't know if they draft a third quarterback. They might sign a UDFA or I don't know. You know, bring back Trace McSorley as the fourth quarterback for camp. They're going to have four quarterbacks on the roster going into camp. I just don't think the way of them acquiring that fourth quarterback is going to be the draft at this point. Like a lot of talk about Jordan Travis, a lot of talk about Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt as a mid-round pick. Don't see that now with Kyle Allen being added to the roster. And Dean Lowry, again, depth defensive lineman. I don't think should preclude them from taking somebody if they really like them in the draft. But it's a stopgap option that gives you some depth, I guess, after losing Armon Watts. But to me, that's a significant downgrade. I really liked Armon Watts. Definitely good to bring back Monty Adams, but yeah, I'm not big on the Dean Lowry signing. Quez Watkins, we've talked a ton about, not necessarily for great reasons, and then Cordell Patterson. So that's the week that was in free agency. Rumor mill is saying the draft class of centers is dropping somewhat. So if they don't get their starting center in the first or their OT, then who position goes in the first? Corner, I would keep in mind, in wide receiver. I mean, those are the only two other options, in my opinion, for what they would do in the first round. If you do see a run on tackles, and that's very possible, in my opinion, in this class, is, a Terrion Arnold, a Quinyon Mitchell, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I would think that that's in play at 20 if one of those guys are there. Those first two names especially would be hard to see, but I think there's a path to it. If you get, if we get the 5 quarterbacks, because I don't know, a lot of smoke around Penix going for sure in the first round. If we can get him before 20, that'd be great for the Steelers. And then if you see the tackles, right? If you can get Alt Fashanu, which is Fashanu, not Fashanu, like I've been saying for the most part just recently, was put out there that it goes Fashanu, so I'm going to retrain my mind now to say that. Fotnu, Fuaga, Mims. If we can get Latham beforehand, like I'm trying to think of the path here where cornerback, one of those two is available. So if we get 5 quarterbacks, like 6 tackles, that's 11. The receivers, you're going to need to see 3. If you get that 4th, if you get Brian Thomas Jr., maybe a few defensive players that aren't like the edge rushers, Dallas Turner, Jared Verse. There's a path to Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold being available. I don't think it's necessarily likely, but if that happens, that would be the case for taking a corner at 20. And then wide receiver, like, Brian Thomas Jr. would have to be the one. He would break that streak, like I mentioned, of Omar or Tomlin being at their first round picks pro day. But I think that he would probably be the only one. I love A.D. Mitchell. I have him higher than Brian Thomas, but doesn't seem like the league is on that same path. So I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be the receiver in play at 20. I mean, can't imagine that we see, like, I know that there's a lot of people hoping for Roma Dunze. That is a trade up and a significant trade up scenario, in my opinion. Not very realistic, but yeah, like the wide receiver 4 or 5 in the class is probably who you're looking at 20. But again, that would mean a significant run on tackles, in my opinion, and the center class not being coveted in that way, which seems like there's a lot of smoke too. So appreciate the question, Tim. Again, over 200 people in here. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you're watching this back, if you didn't join the live, be sure to hit me in the comments, even afterwards, because I'll respond to you guys there. We can continue to talk ball. Definitely want to do another one of these next week. Can't be during the weekend, though. It's going to have to be during the week for this upcoming one. I will be in Philly next weekend for WrestleMania. Very excited for that. Let's finish that story, Cody. I do acknowledge the tribal chief, but it's time for a change. Let's finish the story. Appreciate you guys being in here. I'm going to wrap this thing up. So again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Get at me on social media, Zachary Smith PGH. Follow us at Around the 412 on all social media platforms. Can't thank you guys enough for making these very fun. Love doing these at least once a week. So be back next week. Stay in touch for when that's going to be. Like I said, going to have to be during the week at some point as opposed to the weekend for next week's one. But wish everybody a happy Easter. Until next week, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.